Thank you, Elie Honig, for coming on the show. Just to get right into it, on the day that news broke that Mayor Giuliani's house was raided, he stayed curiously silent, and then a day later was back to his usual voluble Rudy. How's that working out for him?
Yeah, I mean, Rudy would know as well as anybody that the first piece of advice that any criminal defendant, suspect, subject of a search warrant should take or receive is shut up. Rudy, not the shutting up type, nor was Donald Trump, nor is Matt Gaetz. It seems to be a little bit of an ethic, I guess, in this crew to get out there and go on the attack. And when he did decide to speak, Adam, I was not at all surprised. I mean, it almost probably could have predicted exactly what he'd say and what his surrogates would say, which is essentially just a rehashed version of witch hunt, politicization, they're out to get me, that kind of thing. So it was I thought you were going to ask me what my response was when I heard Rudy had been searched. And is this a cursing podcast?
It can be.
I said, I won't say it, but I said, I had just finished a little Supreme Court segment on CNN. I thought, I got the afternoon. Looks pretty open. I got the call. I said, oh, blank. But I will tell you, I'm happy to see that this search happened. And I'll tell you why. Not that look, it's a tough thing for anyone to be the recipient of a search warrant or perhaps down the line an arrest warrant. But this to me was a signal from DOJ that they're not going to shy away from all things Trump, because there is a world where DOJ says, we're not going down that road. It's old. It's been done. He's been impeached twice. We're not going to get down into the muck with Donald Trump. We're just going to move along. And there were some indicators they might be going that way. And the fact that they went through and conducted the search warrant, which, as we'll probably discuss, what had been squashed by the prior DOJ under the Trump administration, tells me that they're not afraid to go near Trump. And I think that's a good thing and an important thing.
And you're the author of a book, Hatchet Man, talking about Bill Barr's DOJ.
Yes.
So
good plug.
Just expand a little bit more on what this signals, that this was obviously an investigation that started under Barr's DOJ. And as you noted, the New York Times has reported that DOJ officials interfered with that or put the brakes on it.
Yeah, the central premise of my book, Adam, is that Bill Barr was a uniquely and perhaps the most corrupt attorney general we ever had. Now, what do I mean by that? He, number one, used the DOJ to protect his own allies, Donald Trump's allies. And we know there's a history of this. It's not like I'm making this up, right? I mean, Michael Flynn, Roger Stone, the interventions in both of those cases were absolutely unprecedented. Also, coming back to mind now, the fact that Bill Barr, one of the lesser remembered, I think, instances of malpractice, I'll say, by Bill Barr, was his refusal to even open a criminal investigation on the Ukraine scandal, right? There's evidence there. What you need to open an investigation is what we call predication. And it really just means some nugget, some kernel of information in good faith that you can go on. They had predication and then some to open an investigation. And Bill Barr's position throughout was, no, we're not even going to take a look. We're not even going to take a look. And it's even more outrageous now when you sort of look back at what I think was bribery, I think was extortion, but all the stuff that went into Donald Trump's first impeachment. And you have to now differentiate between first and second impeachment. The fact that this investigation of Rudy was started while Barr was in office, I attribute to the SDNY, to my old office, being uniquely and fiercely independent. All the reporting I've seen in Common Sense is that this investigation started with SDNY. And Bill Barr, certainly, there's no indication Bill Barr said, hey, why don't we take a look at Rudy? And then what Bill Barr did, or maybe Jeffrey Rosen, who was his number two, was step in and squash this search warrant reportedly. And now we have the search warrant approved. And one of two things, or maybe two of two things, could have happened here. One, either SDNY found new or more evidence. I haven't seen any particular likelihood of that. Or two, you have a whole new crew in there now. And they said, hold on a second, we need to give this a fresh look. And they looked at it and concluded it has sufficient probable cause, which is a pretty low bar, by the way. So it's a signal to me that DOJ has gotten itself back towards the right track. I don't love everything DOJ's done, by the way, under Biden. And I don't love the way Biden has handled DOJ in every respect, which we can talk about, but they're definitely moving towards the better path now.
And you were talking about that fierce independence, the kind of reputation of the sovereign district. So this
Yeah.
sort of gets into what the suspicion is swirling around Giuliani. Of course, the reporting has focused on Ukraine. There has been other reporting that Giuliani was involved in other forms of what has been called shadow diplomacy. And that has included the money laundering case of Reza Zarrab, that where there has been suspected DOJ interference. Not to get into too much of the realm of speculation here, but if you were a prosecutor at the Southern District, would your search be limited to Ukraine, or would you be looking into all of the other reports that have been swirling about Rudy Giuliani potentially getting involved in shadow diplomacy in Turkey and Venezuela?
The investigation, if I was running it, would be into all of those things, plus whatever else we might find. That's generally how you do investigations. I mean, you are not required legally, nor should you practically say, we're only going to look down this very narrow alley. Now, to get a search warrant, you have to establish probable cause, okay? And you have to bring that to a judge, and the judge has to sign off on it. So, and you can't, it's not enough to just say, hey, judge, we have probable cause, like take our word for it. The judge has to read your document. You have to lay it out in detail. It's painstaking. And you have to lay out what crime you believe may have probable cause occurred. And the crime reportedly that they used here to get this search warrant is FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which basically says you can't lobby or try to influence the American government on behalf of a foreign government and foreign nationals without registering first. Now, I'll give you both sides of this one. The argument for FARA and why it's important is because our government needs to know who we're dealing with. When someone comes in and lobbies Congress or the president, okay, is this person being paid, or is this person representing a foreign country? That's obviously something that's important for our national security, for the integrity of our government. The flip side of it, or the more negative view, is it's just a paperwork crime. He didn't file his registration, essentially. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I will tell you as a practical matter, as a prosecutor, I would not feel comfortable. I would feel comfortable doing a search warrant based on FARA. But whatever it says in your search warrant, you can use all the evidence you find. So your search warrant may say, Judge, we have probable cause of a FARA violation. And then you may find evidence of, who knows, maybe there's a plan to rob a bank in there, right? I mean, obviously, hypothetically, you can still use that. You can you're not limited to what it says in your search warrant application. All that said, I would not feel comfortable moving ahead with a charge that was led by, where my top charge, my most serious charge was FARA, or my only charge was FARA, because it is a really confusing, vague, sort of rarely used statute. And to go to trial, United States versus Rudy Giuliani, one count, FARA, that I don't like the odds. I don't like the jury appeal of that from the government's point of view. And I think, look, are they fine? Do they maybe have other evidence that he was involved in other crimes? Wouldn't surprise me at all. Like you just laid out, Adam, Rudy has all sorts of crossed wires, money flowing in from overseas. He's close to other people who've been indicted. Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman come to mind. So could they have something more? Absolutely. Would I want something more as the SDNY before I charge this? Yes, I would.
So you just mentioned Lev Parnas. One of the developments in the case since this whole thing began was a superseding indictment charging Lev Parnas with defrauding people through a company named Fraud Guarantee. We know that Rudy Giuliani was linked to that company. We don't know very much beyond that. Would a charge connected to that be something you would feel comfortable with?
Well, if the proof was there, and that is, my attention does keep going back to that scenario. So Parnas and Fruman were charged basically along with two other people with essentially, bottom line, funneling in hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal foreign campaign contributions to pro-Trump organizations. Now, as soon as that indictment came out, I thought, how could this be without Rudy being involved somehow? Maybe he knew what they were doing. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he had criminal intent. Maybe he didn't. But Rudy is involved to the extent, maybe not necessarily criminally, but a very bizarre facet of this case is that Rudy was paid $500,000 through this company, which, as you said, Adam, is somehow they decided to name it fraud guarantee, which is one of my favorite comedic details of any case I've ever seen. But I mean, what's that money for? Why on earth are these guys really paying Rudy Giuliani $500,000? I mean, they tried to say, both sides, I guess, tried to say it was for quote unquote legal and business advice rendered. I mean, no way. I'm sorry. I don't know this for a fact. There's no possible way Rudy Giuliani, in my mind, using common sense, gave them $500,000 worth of actual legal advice or business advice. I'd be interested to see those files. Like, I'm sure there's literally nothing in them. So the theory, what I would be thinking if I was looking at this as a prosecutor is that $500,000 perhaps was essentially we're paying Rudy to advocate for our interests, to exercise his influence on our behalf with the US government. And if that's what it was really for, and Rudy didn't register as a foreign lobbyist or lobbyist for foreign interests, that could technically be a FARA violation. But let me say this about FARA. It's a really difficult statute. It was, I just read an article, I think it was in the National Review, to give proper credit where due, saying that FARA only was charged 7 times total between the mid-60s and 2015, and only 3 of those resulted in convictions. Mueller used it. He took a couple pleas to FARA violations from Manafort and Rick Gates, and he got Michael Flynn to admit that FARA was sort of part of his relevant criminal conduct. He also charged Gregory Craig in a spinoff case from Mueller with FARA. He was acquitted, found not guilty at trial. But the thing I keep coming back to about FARA is, where do you draw the line? I mean, here's the example I'm going to give you, Adam. Bono, okay? You know, Bono from U2, all right? Bono has done all sorts of, I think, benevolent, positive lobbying for, asking the US government. He was close with President George W. Bush for aid and policy changes towards Africa, right? Solving AIDS and hunger in Africa and towards Ireland. Well, is he lobbying? I mean, you don't have to be paid, right? Is he lobbying on behalf of a foreign country? Maybe he was. Should he have registered? Are we going to charge Bono with a FARA violation? So I use that only by way of example to show that FARA is a tricky statute. It's much harder to explain and justify than, say, robbery or fraud or something like that. So if I'm prosecuting this case, I want more than FARA before I roll it out.
And what does this development mean for Lev Parnas? We know that he went before the House Intelligence Committee, shared thousands of files. He's been speaking to the press over and over again. If you're looking at this from the point of view of the defense attorney for Lev Parnas, is this a positive development in his case as someone who seems to be very eager to cooperate?
Interesting question. That was a deep exhale for me, because I've seen this kind of cooperators. I don't think I've ever seen someone. I don't think I've ever seen someone so eager to cooperate. Remember, he almost stormed the inauguration. He almost stormed the impeachment because he was so desperate to testify about Trump. And Joe Bondi, his lawyer, who I know a bit, was parading him around and trying to put him on every news show and get him in the prosecutor's office. The fact that he's that eager, yet, as far as we know, has not been signed to a formal cooperation agreement by the SDNY, is a flashing red light that something's wrong from the SDNY's perspective. Because as a prosecutor, if you believed he was reliable and if you believed he had useful information, you would sign him up in a heartbeat. But again, as far as we know publicly, that has not happened yet. Maybe it's happened in the interim. Maybe something has changed. That can happen too. Does this development help or hurt Lev Parnas? First of all, I wonder if they used any of Lev Parnas's information to get this search warrant. I guess it's unlikely. It probably helps him, if anything, because now that we know the SDNY is going forward with its Rudy investigation and hasn't just sort of dropped it, I guess there's more value that Lev Parnas might be able to offer. But again, I'm being very careful if I'm signing up Lev Parnas, as I was with any cooperating witness. You don't just take any of these folks at their word. You have to make sure they're corroborated and backed up. And so anything he claimed to me, I would want to see, not anything, but enough of the things he claimed to me, I would want to see receipts. I would want to see proof or documentation.
Just one more question for you, because I know you have a very busy day ahead of you. In terms of the you gave an invitation a little bit earlier to kind of grade how Biden's Department of Justice is doing. So if you can just expand on that a bit. What are some of your insights, critiques? Where can it stand to improve?
So I think the new DOJ itself has been really strong, especially the last week or so, right? If you just tick it off, they did this search warrant on Rudy. They brought hate crime charges in the Ahmaud Arbery killing. It's now out in the public that they intend to charge Derek Chauvin and the other Minneapolis officers. They've instituted what we call pattern and practice investigations of troubled police departments in Minneapolis and Louisville. They added weapons of mass destruction charges in the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot case. All of that, I think, is great. And by the way, the caliber of the people now running DOJ is 20 leagues above what it was. I mean, one of my main critiques of Bill Barr is the guy never worked a day as a line prosecutor. I know he was AG in the 90s and AG twice, actually. Little trivia question, one of two people ever to be AG twice. There was some other guy in the 1800s. But Barr never went through a day in the SDNY like I did. He never tried a case as a prosecutor. He never had some defense lawyer going after him. He never had some judge berating him. And even worse, none of Barr's top brass had ever had that experience either. Jeffrey Rosen, Brian Benchkowski, who was in charge of the criminal division, right? You can go on down the line. Contrast that with this group: Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, Vanita Gupta, all of whom have proven their steel. Ken Polite, friend of mine from the SDNY, who's going to be in charge of the criminal division. All of them came up through the ranks, were trained the right way, as I was, I believe. And so I think they have a much better understanding of what DOJ needs to be. My main criticism with DOJ so far is I don't think they've done a bang up job on the January 6th cases yet. I think they've been going for the low hanging fruit only. I've not seen any sedition charges. I think sedition absolutely applies. I've not seen any of the instigators or inflamers. I've not even seen an indication that they're seriously investigating Rudy, Donald Trump, Ron Johnson, Mo Brooks, Josh Hawley for the things that they said to incite this mob. We've not seen a murder charge, but I now see that that's much more complicated with the recent news about Officer Sicknick's cause of death. Right. And, they haven't caught the guy who planted the bombs at the RNC and DNC. So I get that they're new, but they have work to do. That's a fairly mild criticism compared to all the positives. Joe Biden, it was good to hear the president say after Giuliani's search warrant was executed that he knew nothing about it. He was told nothing about it. I believe him. I take him at his word. And on this instance, and that's good. That's how it should be. DOJ should not be giving anyone at the White House, the president or the chief of staff or anybody, a heads up about this kind of thing. My critiques of Joe Biden as president are two things. When the news came out that his son, Hunter Biden, was under investigation, he said, I support my son. Fine. No problem with that. But he said two other things. He said, one, I'm confident he did nothing wrong or something like that, that's the merits of the case, Mr. President. I'm sorry. And then he also said something along the lines of, my son has been the target of lots of sort of vindictive or partisan things before. He'll be fine. That's really just a prettied up version of witch hunt, right? It's not as obvious as Donald Trump tweeting out all caps witch hunt 22 times a day. It's not as bad, but the message there is the same thing. And I think that was a mistake for Joe Biden to say that. I think he may have even said that before he was sworn in as president. I don't remember the exact timing. The other thing is, I don't love how Joe Biden, and maybe this isn't taking hold, but a news story came out, again, this may have been during the transition, that Biden had told numerous advisors, it was a well-sourced story, I think the number was 4 advisors, that he didn't want DOJ going after Trump. He just, for the same reasons I said before, too messy, didn't want to have distraction from his agenda. Now, did Joe Biden call a press conference and say this? No. Is Joe Biden a savvy enough DC veteran of 50-some years, 40-some years, to know that if you call 4 advisors into a room and tell them this really interesting, really important thing, it's going to leak out fairly immediately, which it did? Yes. So I believe Joe Biden knew what he was doing there. I believe Joe Biden, as reported, does not want to see DOJ go down this rabbit hole. I mean, there is reporting that that the White House, maybe not Biden himself, was upset that DOJ actually did the Rudy raid the afternoon, just hours before, or they did it in the morning, but the same day as Biden's big speech to Congress. And it knocked the speech right off the front lines and the A block of cable news because it was so sensational and unexpected. So I guess I give Biden half credit there back, because even if he put the word out there that he doesn't want them going near Trump, they're doing it anyway, or at least going one circle out with Rudy Giuliani, which is good. That's what DOJ should do. DOJ should not at all be responsive to anything the president wants or doesn't want or says or doesn't say.
Spoken like a true alum of the sovereign district of New York.
Listen, I fully admit I was both heavily indoctrinated and then I was the indoctrinatee and then I became the indoctrinator. I am a true believer in absolute separation and absolute independence.
Thank you, Elie Honig, for coming on the show, and congratulations on your new position with CNN and your podcast as well.
Thank you, Adam. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Very few people understand that. Very few people who never worked at the SDNY understand the SDNY like you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.